The acronym SLD refers to a category related to specific learning disorders that belong to neurodevelopmental disorders. These disorders can affect very different learning sectors, therefore they are divided in dyslexia, a learning disorder that affects the decoding of words; dysorthography, a specific learning disorder that affects the writing skills; dysgraphia, a specific learning disorder that affects the handwriting ability; and dyscalculia, that involves difficulties with math reasoning. Sometimes these disorders appear individually, but often they coexist. They are defined as specific because they affect a specific field of skills in a significant but still limited way. Due to the nature of the skills involved, SLD appear during the early years of primary school and make learning particularly tiring and frustrating. At a legislative level, after years of lack or insufficient knowledge of the causes of these difficulties, legislation has taken a major step forward. On October the 8th, 2010, Law number 170 laid down new rules on specific learning disabilities. In addition, both the definition of SLD and dyslexia, dysgraphia, dysorthography, and dyscalculia have been introduced for the first time in a legislative text. On July 2011, guidelines were laid down explaining in detail all the action that the regional school offices, schools, and families must take for the protection and support of students with SLD. The learning of a foreign language in students with dyslexia is a particularly difficult and discouraging task for dyslexic students. The first thing to take into account in the learning of a foreign language is its transparency or opacity, that is to say, the correspondence between grapheme and phoneme. Other problems are related to specific tasks such as memorization, vocabulary acquisition, production skills, and the educational environment in general. These problems in learning of a foreign language in particular can have a negative impact on the children's self-esteem and personality, because they will often be labeled by their teachers or parents as the ones who are not fully committed or do not study hard enough. Later, this might result in behavioral disorders, lack of interest, emotional closure, or even school dropout. These are the reasons why it is important to suggest to get as soon as possible a diagnosis of these disorders if there is a suspicion about it. However, specific learning disorders do not preclude students from learning a foreign language. On the contrary, teaching programs tailored to the profile of needs of the learner make possible to simplify their teaching. In this regard, the SQUARE method was created by Santina Spiriti, who entered the schools as a researcher and consultant to the teachers. English is an opaque and very complex language from a phonological point of view, which makes it particularly difficult for a student with SLD. She kept in mind that students with dyslexia favor non-verbal visual learning styles and created what she defines as the English mathematical formula, in a simple diagram containing 4 squares in a scalar form. Thanks to the use of colors and square diagrams, from which the method itself takes the name, it gives a clear idea of the language concept map. In this way, the students will be able to visualize the mechanism of the language and handle them easily and independently, while the teachers will be able to avoid difficult explanation. The use of geometric shapes and colors allows the student to form a series of visual connections related to grammatical concepts, stimulating the so-called visual learning, reducing efforts and optimizing the learning time. Thanks to the visual learning, concepts are fixed in mind because visualization consolidates the traditional method of read and repeat. For a student with SLD, school success means achieving the same goals as his or her classmates, but with a personalized path that takes into account his or her specific difficulties and identifies precisely how to overcome them. Article 5 of Law 170 deals with educational and didactic measures to support learning, and indicates that these students are entitled to appropriate compensatory measures of educational flexibility during their education. In fact, to a personalized plan, they have to add the so-called compensatory tools that must be chosen based on a careful analysis that takes into account the student's profile. Examples of compensatory tools are text-to-speech tools, which allows you to transform digital text files into audio files. OCR, which starting from a paper sheet scanned by a device, are able to recognize the characters and transform them into digital text. Cognitive map softwares, which allow to summarize the concept contained in a text. Digital books, tools that are the reproduction of the paper textbook. Electronic dictionaries, fundamental to the approach to the foreign language. Their evolution in digital format allows a much more accessible use for all students with learning difficulties. Finally, I would like to mention another example of didactic that has been successful, the project called Inclusione 3.0, carried out by the University of Macerata in collaboration with the Confucius Institute. A Chinese language course was offered to a group of dyslexic students with a consequent summer school at the University of Beijing, where students were guests. The language choice primarily concerned the consideration of the difficulties of the students involved. In fact, Chinese is not an alphabetical language but uses graphic units of meaning, so once recognized and understood, this unit does not need to be further split into letters. In addition, the grammar of the language is quite schematic and allows to create simple sentences that the students were able to follow without any particular problems. This has contributed to the considerable elimination of frustration. Therefore, it is possible, even if you have this kind of difficulties, to manage to learn a foreign language. But in order to start, we should not consider this characteristic as a limit, an incapacity, or worse, a problem. There are alternative ways to go that, combined with an open and inclusive educational context, help to welcome this diversity and give it voice.